Tom Halverson, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. This is the second of a two-part conversation we're having on the transition that the global energy system is expected to undergo over the next several decades. In part one, we talked about the overall trend away from fossil fuels toward electrification and what it means globally. Today, we want to focus specifically on impacts to the rural economy here in the United States.
Great. Looking forward to the conversation because it's very important for rural America.
Also with us again today is Teri Viswanath, our Knowledge Exchange energy analyst. Teri, thank you for being with us as well.
Excited to be part of that conversation.
Tom, I'm going to ask you to set the context for us here with the first question, which is just talk about the role that energy production plays in all its dimensions in the rural economy today.
Well, energy production in all of its forms is really important contributor to GDP in the rural economy on the one hand, and it's disproportionately located in the rural economy and in rural America on the other. You don't put gigantic power plants and solar arrays and fuel processing plants and things like that in downtown Manhattan, Chicago, or San Francisco, right? So it's a disproportionate issue for rural America, and therefore how this evolves is going to be very, very impactful for both the rural economy, for jobs in rural America, and so forth.
Teri, what would you add to what Tom just said?
I agree. So, when we take a look at this, it's concentrated in a few counties. And so in some rural counties, that could be 50% of employment. It's a very important story with regard to our rural GDP.
Let's talk about some specific sectors, Teri, and I'll have you start us off here talking about coal. Coal is at once a very cheap form of energy, but from a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, it's one of the dirtiest as well. What is happening in the coal complex in the United States, and what do we expect to see going forward?
Well, Arthur, since 2000, we've seen about a third of the U.S. coal fleet retire. So a number of these have actually been an accelerated retirement schedule, and that has a pretty profound impact. Oftentimes when we think about the coal economy, a lot of people immediately think about coal mining. But coal mining only represents about 43,000 jobs in the U.S. What's more impactful here happens to be the impact on these rural communities when we think about the coal plant retirements.
Let's talk about another sector, which is oil and natural gas. Oil and natural gas extraction has been a major form of economic activity in rural areas over the last 10 years because of fracking. Talk about what's been happening here and, again, what we expect to see as this broader trend develops.
Well, first, Arthur, when we think about the sector itself, it's really concentrated with regard to oil and gas extraction, really concentrated in just a few or a handful of states, and very impactful within those states. Also, when we think about the fossil fuel industry in total, we're looking at 1.6 million jobs. I mentioned there's about 50,000 or so that are in the coal mining. If we think about oil and gas, just oil and gas, not the thermal plants or the midstream or the composite industry, you're looking at 968,000 jobs. We lost about 100,000 jobs over the period of COVID because of the downturn in that industry. It has been painful. However, what's important to note is that we have a different process. We have fracking, which actually uses a lot more labor out in the field, so we're already seeing that evolution. Over a long time, however, this oil and gas industry is going to look a lot like that coal industry as we transition out. The decarbonization process, however, may be 30 years in coming.
There's another part of the rural economy that's very important with ties to the energy industry, Tom, and that's agriculture. Something like 40% of corn goes to produce ethanol in this country, which is used for gasoline in cars. Talk about what we can expect there and how that part of the rural economy is going to need to adapt as well to this trend.
Well, this has been a great success story for corn producers in the United States for the last 20, 25 years. And what's going to happen, though, is if projections are correct and we get to, say, 30% of the new car sales by, say, 2035 become electric vehicles, that's a straight line reduction of something like 30% of the fuel consumption and then you prorata the slice of that represented by ethanol, right? So what you can see is a long period, 10, 15, 20 years, where the intrinsic demand for gasoline for vehicles is going to go down. That is a sufficiently long period of time that the market mechanisms that we have in our economy will adjust. There are plenty of other uses for the corn, both for other things you can turn it into domestically here in the United States, export markets and other things. But I think that people in the ethanol complex are fully aware of what this transition looks like, and they're aware of the fact that there's going to be an adjustment period. But they're also aware that there's going to be a pretty long timeline for the necessary adjustments to be made.
So we've ticked down a couple of industries where the impacts of this trend there's some downside risks associated with it. Let's talk about upside potential. Teri, talk about renewable energy investment in this country. How big is it going to be, and where is it going to take place?
That story is really exciting, Arthur. So when we think about this already, when we think about wind generation and solar, we'll talk about wind first. So wind generation has been really, really important. It's more dispersed. We're seeing a lot of those communities we talked about with regard to oil and gas extraction. Well, wind is also a really important area, really important resource for those communities. So right now you're seeing this great sort of switch that we're seeing in those communities, and they're benefiting by the wind power. Now, 99% of our wind turbines have to be out in our rural communities. It's a space requirement. Utility scale wind means that's where they're going to be. Onshore wind is about rural communities, and it's about investment in those communities. Right now, we're at the second generation, so we're seeing these repowering occur within the communities. It's another opportunity for growth again. That growth driver will be with us. On the solar side, 2/3 of the world, solar is the lowest cost source of generation. We're going to see a proliferation. It's occurring in every community, but largely utility scales happening in our rural communities. So it's a very positive story with regard to the numbers. Going back to employment, however, right now it represents about 250,000 jobs. That compares to the 1.6 million we talked about. That's not a great story, so you're not seeing the uplift. However, longer term, it may be as big with regard to revenue around the 2035 that Tom talked about. About that time, it could be as big as our three major sectors for our rural communities. It could be a big number.
We'll close this out with you, Tom, and I guess I'll ask the question this way. It's easy listening to this conversation to worry about this, right? Especially if you think in terms of the status quo. It's easy to envision the negative impacts to existing industries that are part of the rural economy today. How confident are you that the rural economy can capably adjust to this transition, find new markets, build up new industries that replace the ones that will be in decline as this transition occurs?
It reminds me a lot of the transition over the last 25 years from fixed telephony to mobile phones, right? An entire industry has been completely transformed. A whole legacy set of infrastructure became redundant or less useful and less valuable. A whole billions and billions of dollars of new investment in new equipment and technology has replaced it. Jobs have been migrated and replaced. It's a different industry, different technology, but the process of creative destruction is very similar. And so my feeling is I am deeply optimistic. This country is immensely flexible, immensely resilient, immensely talented, immensely capable of driving technological change, business change, market change, and adjusting to it. In rural America in particular, which is particularly resilient and flexible, should be able to adjust to this. And I would encourage our customers and the people in rural America to, while acknowledging the difficulties and the challenges of change, embrace opportunity, right? Because it's coming like weather. You can't change it, you can't stop it. All you can do is figure out how you're going to adjust to it and try and turn it to your advantage.